Welcome to Yahoo Finance Sports Report, a unique look at the business of sports, brought to you by Yahoo Finance and Yahoo Sports. I'm your host, Joe Pompliano, and I'm here to coach you through the financial game. We'll look beyond the headlines, analyze all the latest sports news, the teams, trades, and billion-dollar deals, so you and your portfolio will win big. This week, we're talking about the potential expansion of March Madness, Puma's new sponsorship deal with the English Premier League, the return of Ted Lasso, and so much more. I'll also be joined by WME sports agent Zack Miller to discuss the WNBA and the skyrocketing growth of women's basketball. Let's huddle up and get right into it. All right, it's time for this week's Pomps Playbook, where I take a look at some of the biggest headlines in sports that you and your portfolio need to know. Let's kick things off with a new media rights extension between Comcast and the International Olympic Committee. Last week, Comcast and the IOC announced a new $3 billion media rights extension for the Olympic Games. Comcast's current $7.6 billion deal originally ran through the 2032 Summer Olympics in Australia. However, the new agreement extends Comcast's current media rights deal through the year 2036. So the company will now broadcast the 2034 Winter Games in Salt Lake City and the 2036 Summer Games at a location to be determined. The deal is another sign that Comcast and NBC Universal are all in on live sports rights as a way to generate subscriptions to their streaming platform, Peacock. NBC will broadcast the NBA for the first time in over 20 years starting next season as part of a new $2.5 billion annual broadcast deal with the league. The Olympics have also proved to be fruitful for Comcast. The 2024 Summer Olympics in Paris were watched by more than 30 million people on NBC's TV channels and streaming services, an 82% increase from Tokyo 2020 that generated a record $1.2 billion in advertising revenue. Peacock was also a massive winner, with over 4,000 hours of Paris 2024 coverage and 23.5 billion minutes streamed by subscribers. Next up, we're talking about team expansion for the NCAA's March Madness tournament. Right now, 68 teams compete in both the men's and women's brackets, which are in full swing this week. However, college sports leaders are considering expanding each tournament to 72 or even 76 teams. More teams would mean more TV inventory and ticket sales for the NCAA, but ultimately, this decision comes down to money. The NCAA men's tournament is fueled by its $1 billion annual TV deal with CBS and Warner Bros. Discovery, while the women's tournament is part of an 8-year, $920 million ESPN deal covering 40 total NCAA championships. These deals fund revenue distributions that pay out units to participating conferences and their schools. And more March Madness teams would mean more units and more money to go around. But to expand, the NCAA and its TV partners need to figure out how to fund additional games without cutting unit payouts. According to The Athletic, one option could be lifting restrictions on TV ads from alcohol and pharmaceutical companies. The NCAA could also start allowing ads on March Madness courts or even player jerseys. Now, March Madness expansion won't happen until a new financial model is created. But with so much money at stake, don't be surprised if the NCAA eventually finds a way to make everything work. To round out Pomp's playbook, let's talk about Puma's new partnership with the English Premier League in soccer. Earlier this week, the Premier League announced that Puma will become its new ball supplier starting with the 2025-26 season. The deal is a massive shakeup in soccer, as Nike has been the official match ball supplier of the Premier League for the past 25 years. According to The Athletic, Nike and the Premier League couldn't come to a resolution on a new extension. And now that Puma has swooped in, the Premier League deal further expands the company's global influence in soccer. In the Premier League alone, Puma currently sponsors the 2024 champion Manchester City, as well as multiple players like Kai Havertz, Marc Cucurella, and Harry Maguire. The German brand is also the official ball supplier for Spain's La Liga and stole Nike's ball supplier deal from Italy's Serie A in 2022. And with the Premier League now on board, that means Puma is now the official ball supplier for 3 of Europe's top 5 soccer leagues. This deal also puts Puma at the forefront of the world's top soccer league and its massive global audience. According to the Premier League's own figures, the league is broadcast in 189 countries worldwide and has a global fan base of 1.87 billion people. This week for the Deeper Dive, where I give you a play-by-play analysis of news in the sports world and its significance to your bottom line, we're discussing the potential of a future lockout in the WNBA. Now, the WNBA Players Association opted out of its collective bargaining agreement last year, which means a new CBA must be negotiated between the league and its players before the 2026 season. These negotiations are standard practice in sports, but if a sports league can't agree with its union on a new CBA, there is a lockout. Angel Reese and WNBA player DeJounte Carrington recently spoke about this on the Unapologetically Angel podcast, hinting that players will sit out if the new CBA doesn't meet their demands. Now, this isn't shocking, and I get it. The WNBA has skyrocketed in popularity on the heels of Caitlin Clark's rookie season. Regular season attendance was up 48% last year. The league signed a new TV deal with ESPN worth $2.2 billion over 11 years. And the WNBA Finals had its best ratings in 25 years. Clark's games alone also averaged 1.2 million viewers. Plus, there's no denying that Caitlin Clark has made hundreds of millions of dollars for the WNBA, despite an annual rookie salary of just $76,000. And the league's highest paid player, Jackie Young, only makes about $500,000 per season right now. So it's no surprise that WNBA players want to make more money, especially when other leagues split revenue roughly 50-50 compared to a 90-10 split in the WNBA. Clark's superstar teammate Aaliyah Boston even told 60 Minutes last year that she wants to make $1 million per season. However, this mindset doesn't match reality because the league's cap table makes player salaries nearly impossible. This is because the NBA has subsidized the WNBA for decades and controls much of its annual revenue. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said the WNBA has cost the league $10 million annually since it started. On top of the NBA's funding, the WNBA also raised $75 million in 2022 from an investor group that included Nike and several other sports owners. As a result, WNBA owners now control 42% of the league. The NBA controls another 42%, and the 2022 investor group controls the remaining 16%. This means that less than 50% of WNBA revenue goes to the league and its players, including its new $2.2 billion deal with ESPN. This is a critical difference between the WNBA and other major professional sports leagues, as organizations like the NFL and NBA can split revenue equally with players because they still control the majority of their business. Now, I enjoy the WNBA, and in fact, Cleveland's recent $250 million commitment for an expansion team shows the league's massive potential. Investors are excited about women's sports, and I think the WNBA will eventually be profitable. However, I also think WNBA players need to be more realistic about this situation. It's not the players' fault that the WNBA needed $10 million annually from the NBA to get to this point, but that doesn't mean the problem doesn't exist. Player salaries will go up in the next CBA, but a 50-50 revenue split isn't in the cards right now, and would be misguided to stunt the WNBA's momentum with a lockout. We've made it to the one-on-one, a conversation where I get to break down news and sports with a key player in the industry. This week, I'm joined by WME sports agent Zack Miller. Zack, thank you so much for joining us. I know you represent a lot of WNBA players and other women's basketball players at this point, so I would love to just start with your feedback on where the WNBA is today, given how much change we've seen over the last couple of years.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I think it's a really interesting time. The WNBA, women's college basketball, even women's high school basketball is at a moment where finally people are not only paying attention, but feeling like if they don't get involved, then they're almost being left behind. And that's a really interesting point for not only the league and the teams, but also the players who have been, excellent talent on the court, but also really amazing talent off the court for a while now. And it's great to see the recognition finally being out there. There's still a lot more to go, and you can't get complacent at all. And there's definitely still room and areas of growth that I think we can figure out collectively. But all in all, definitely moving and trending in the right direction. And this year and the next couple years ahead will really be impactful for what's to come, both presently and in the future.
Yeah, and Zack, you sit in this really unique spot where you're negotiating deals between the players and the brands. And I imagine those conversations have gotten easier over the years. But one of the things I'm particularly interested in is just where you see the WNBA long-term in the landscape of professional sports. Obviously, revenue is growing and viewership is growing. They just signed this massive new TV rights agreement, and they have expansion teams coming, which is going to grow everything else even more. But when you look long-term, call it 5-10 years out from now, where do you think the WNBA ends up in the landscape of professional sports?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and I'll answer in a few parts, right? A couple years ago in 2018, we signed Candace Parker, one of the greatest players of all time in any sport, but in particular in the WNBA. And even then, she came to us from another agency with only one deal really in hand. And Part of that was, on prior discussions, but a lot of it had to do with just the industry and how they viewed and still view, honestly, WNBA players at the time. So the past few years have really been focused on trying to break down those barriers and those walls that existed for whatever reason. We can get into those, but that was really the past few years and what you had to do, even with a talent like a Candace, right? So you'd had a few players, a few marquee talent that could transcend the sport who were finally, over the past couple of years, and really expedited in COVID, to be honest, uh, who were able to get into business with brands. And then you'd be able to build pretty deep layers into those multi-year relationships where you could start to build out foundation efforts and really treating it like any other talent deal, which it finally deserved. Now I think it's great that you have a lot of new opportunities and you have new teams and a lot of new opportunities for players as well. The challenge that we're continuing to face in the industry is, okay, how do you get brands and companies and networks to invest heavily across the board while also still going deep with each of their relationships? Because otherwise things turn pretty transactional and feel very surface level. And that's where you start to then, okay, get a little back into your old ways and it doesn't feel right. So it's a really interesting tipping point, I think, for the industry right now on how we collectively handle all of this, all these newfound eyeballs and interest in the players and in the league and in the team. But how do we continue to make it more than just, hey, here's some cash for these services? That's where real interesting dialogue needs to take place.
One of the things that I'm curious about your perspective on is the financial agreement or the CBA that's coming up between the WNBA Players Association and the league. If people don't know this, the Players Association opted out of their CBA. They have to sign a new one before the 2026 season. There's already been some talk about potential lockouts and things like that if they're unable to come to an agreement. But how do you think this thing plays out long term? And are you hearing anything on the outside that gives you confidence that they'll be able to come to an agreement?
I think, like in most negotiations that take place between a league and a union, there are a host of issues that both sides have, right? I think the overall goal from both parties is that there is no lockout and that this gets accomplished and is agreed upon well in advance of the deadline, right? There are serious issues at play, especially on behalf of the players who for so long have been demanding what they deserve, rightfully so. And now they're at a moment in time where they're able to recognize, hey, we've got a lot of leverage here based on the work we have done, both today, but also in years past. And it's time for us all collectively as players to get what we deserve and what we've earned. And they're not asking for, identical one-to-one dollars from their male counterparts. They're asking for the same respect, honestly, from the league that they play for. And it's hard to argue against that. And you have to obviously hope that they get that. And there are a lot of discussions that are going on with a lot of really smart people in both rooms. And I know they're having those discussions right now. And hopefully it'll evolve to a point where everyone can look back on this deal as not only something that's monumental in the moment, but you can look at it as really something that sets the stage for the next few years and decades to come for women's sports, but also sport in general. Because I think that's something that is really important right now, where we set this thing up for success in the long term. And that doesn't just include, higher salaries, right? There's so many other layers to it, right? In the last CBA, finally maternity leave was properly taken care of. And all of those issues that you would think are so basic to the foundation of a sports league, but in particular, a league full of women. And that is something where all of those other ancillary things on top of, yes, the dollars and the revenue sharing that the W players deserve, all of those collective issues are at the forefront and hopefully going to be figured out in the weeks and months to come.
We've got to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more of my conversation with Zack Miller right after this. Welcome back to Yahoo Finance Sports Report. I'm your host, Joe Pompliano. I'm here with WME sports agent Zack Miller. There's also been some movement in the WNBA this year, particularly with some of your players, but also a number of other players. We had Kelsey Plum going to LA, Sabali's going to Phoenix, and some other players as well. I'd love if you can just take us in the mind of an agent like you and just talk us through how that impacts your job and what that entails.
Yeah, I think it's a little tied in with the CBA question we just talked about, right? The first thing that I do as an agent is sit down with my client and ask what they want, right? Because ultimately it's their life and they're the CEO of their own business and their own life. And I'm simply a vessel to hopefully get them to that point. But oftentimes it comes down to what teams and what franchises are investing in their players, in their organization, not just because they have to, but because they want to. And you've seen the owners, right? Whether it's in Vegas, whether it's in New York, Phoenix, elsewhere, who are saying, no, we don't want to just do what's required, but we want to go above and beyond because this is what these players deserve, right? And so you start there. And it always starts leadership down. And so the conversations with ownership in each situation, but particularly this offseason, was really important and paramount for how we were going to lay the foundation to ultimately get to where we want. Now, the tricky and interesting thing about, you brought up Kelsey and Satu, both players were court. And so they were not just free agents. Their teams could have maintain the position that they had to come back and play for them. And I think it's a testament to not only the relationships that you have to develop, but it's a testament to the players and their ability to be able to demand what they want, but in a way that makes everyone feeling as good as they possibly can about the situation, right? And this offseason saw a lot of movement because there was the ability to move, but also the CBA, I think, is really important, right? Players are looking at this as, okay, where am I going where hopefully I can build long-term success, where I think is going to be the right place to move forward with my career. But I also, in my mind, know that there's going to be a new CBA. So if something doesn't work out, I at least have that fail-safe next year, next offseason, where everyone in this new CBA will enter into, for the most part, into free agency. And I think it'll be a really interesting few months here.
One of the interesting angles about the WNBA is that given where salaries have been over the last couple of decades, players have traditionally gone overseas during the offseason to earn additional income. That has sort of changed, at least initially over the last year, with the launch of Unrivaled, which is an off-season basketball league for players to stay in the United States and earn money. There were some ups and downs in the first year, like any other emerging sports league, but I'm curious quickly on just your opinion of how that first year went.
Yeah, I think overall it's a great opportunity for a lot of players. Our clients in particular, none of them go overseas or have to go overseas because we're lucky enough to have resources here stateside where they can make a living, not just to get by, but to really get ahead as well financially here in the States year round. So we're lucky enough where our clients don't have to go overseas. Having said that, though, Unrivaled is a great opportunity for a lot of players, our clients included. We have 5 clients participate in Unrivaled, and including Kalia Copper, who just won the championship. And so it was a really pivotal moment, I think, for women's sports in general, where, yes, there are some bumps in the road along the way, but that's inevitable in life, right? And so if you can find the right people who want to invest, who also understand, hey, this is an investment, and anyone who understands the investment world knows it's not going to be 100x right out the gate. It may not even be a 2x out the gate. And you may need to lay the foundation for a year, 2, 3, or 4 for you to really see the return on the actual dollar investment. But immediately you can see the impact that it's made here stateside and across the world. You had some of the best players in the league going down for a couple of months to Miami in an infrastructure and an environment that was set up for them to succeed. There were no barriers to entry, and barriers to entry meaning, availability of practice facility, availability of a recovery room, proper housing, all of these things that seem so 101 to what these women deserve. All of those things were down there at Unrivaled. And you saw a lot of brand dollars and a lot of media attention on this league. And there was a lot of pressure, but they succeeded. And this first year, really, I think, puts a lot of pressure on the WNBA to get this CBA right and figure out how we take care of our players, because it is possible to both have the players properly taken care of and successfully run a league. So it was a great first year of Unrivaled, and credit to Nafisa Collier and Brianna Stewart, Alex Bizzell, the whole team who put that together, because everyone was walking away from it feeling impressed and also enthused about, returning back for the future as well.
Well, it's been so fun to see the growth of women's basketball over the last few years, and hopefully that will continue over the next few years. But thank you so much for joining us today, Zack.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
The clock is winding down here, but we have just enough time for some final buzz. So let's talk about Ted Lasso. After more than a year of speculation, Apple TV Plus announced last week that Ted Lasso will return for a fourth season. Jason Sudeikis will reprise his role as the show's namesake character, and told Jason and Travis Kelce on the New Heights podcast that the show will be about Lasso coaching a women's football team this time around. However, Sudeikis didn't confirm to the Kelce brothers whether Coach Lasso will stay in the US or go back to AFC Richmond in the UK. Now, it's not surprising that Apple TV Plus wanted to bring back Ted Lasso. The show won 13 Emmy Awards across its first 3 seasons and is the second most watched series of all time on Apple TV Plus, only recently being passed by Severance for that title earlier this year. Ted Lasso's return could also have downstream impacts on the real world of sports through licensing and sponsorships. For example, the English Premier League signed a $680,000 licensing deal in 2021 for Ted Lasso to use the league's intellectual property. And in 2023, Nike signed a deal with the show to become the official kit supplier for the fictional AFC Richmond team. So, with another season on the way, new licensing deals could be coming for Ted Lasso. Jason Sudeikis is an avid supporter of women's sports and has attended multiple National Women's Soccer League games for Angel City FC. If Season 4 of Ted Lasso takes place in the US, could a licensing deal with the NWSL be on the table for a fictional team coached by Ted Lasso? Or if Lasso goes back to London to coach a women's team for AFC Richmond, could the show secure a licensing deal with the Women's Super League in England? Plus, will Nike come back to the show as the official kit supplier for Ted's new women's team? We'll see what happens, but I'm eager to see how the real-world sports industry will get involved in the return of Ted Lasso. We're all out of time, so it's officially game over for this week. Thank you so much to Zack Miller and all of you for joining us. Make sure to tune in to Yahoo Finance Sports Reports on Thursdays at 5 p.m. wherever you get your podcast. I'm your host, Joe Pompliano. See you next time.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.